welcome to the CultCast, the best hour-long Apple podcast you're going to hear all week long. Joining me today, we have D. Griffin Jones coming in from Ohio. Hey, Griffin.
Good evening.
And our good friend Graham Bauer from Barcelona. Hey, Graham.
Hello, good to be here.
You know, last week we got a lot of really lovely, positive, kind words from our listeners who appreciated the new format of the show and said, you know, oh man, like the combination of Leander, Lewis, and Griffin, that's a really great set of hosts. And to everybody who wrote in, sorry, because Lewis is now on a 4-week vacation as well. So
he'll be back though, yeah.
Rotating panel of guests.
He'll be back. I know, yeah, we miss Lewis. We miss Lewis a lot. His Eeyore-style depressed sighing and cynicism, but he'll be back. So we're going to discuss. We got 3 news items to discuss. Some new iPhone 17. The lineup is coming into focus. We're going to talk about Jeff Williams stepping down. He was probably the most likely candidate for the next CEO, but no more. And the other thing we're going to discuss is the new beta features in iOS 26. And then we're going to do a review and a how-to. So it's going to be a fun, feature-packed show. And this week's sponsor, I'd like to give thanks to the Cult of Mac newsletter for sponsoring this week's show. That is written by yours truly every day. It's a daily newsletter where we summarize, the posts of the day. And unfortunately, it's the best way to get Cult of Mac content. The website is a disaster, but the newsletter is absolutely fantastic. And I actually really enjoy putting it together every day. We get to see, all this. I think we put out a ton of great content. It's like a really good mix of news, reviews, and how-tos. And if you're not subscribed, you really are missing out. This is a great newsletter. We have all sorts of stuff. We have like fun tweets. We have inspirational quotes from Steve Jobs every day. That is, if anything, that you should be subscribing just to get those. Of course, we have a pretty good overview, I think, of what's going on in the Apple world. So if you want to subscribe, please go to newsletters.cultofmac.com, and sign up. It's a free daily newsletter. We have a 75% open rate, which is like unheard of in the newsletter world. People really like our newsletter, so I think you will too. Please sign up. Again, it's newsletters.cultofmac.com.
You forgot my favorite part of the newsletter, which is the daily poll. You have a daily poll based on the questions, and you see the results every next day, and then you can vote every day. It keeps me opening it every time.
Oh.
And also, little pro tip for our audience. I think the best way to read Cult of Mac, the actual content itself, is in the Apple News app. It's very distraction free and fewer ads there.
Oh, okay, good tip. Yeah. Please don't go to the website and look at the ads that keep this thing running. Go to Apple News and the newsletter, and we'll soon be out of business. But anyway, besides that, let's move on. Graham, you're going to talk about this, the design changes, or rather, that it's coming to focus, I think, a little bit more, isn't it, about what's going to be coming in the fall with the iPhone 17 lineup?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're in the peak iPhone leak season now, I guess, with like a couple of months to go until the announcement that we all expect in the fall of the new iPhones. And on Cult of Mac this week, we covered a leak from a Chinese leaker called Digital Chat Station on Weibo. Is it Weibo or Weibo? How does...
I haven't got a clue.
Okay, I'm going to say Weibo. And so Digital Chat Station, I would say this rumor is more like consolidating and confirming rather than giving us much that's new. So apparently Apple will be using this LiPo, low injection pressure over molding technology across its whole iPhone 17 lineup. And what this means, newsflash, thinner bezels, which is no surprise because every year there are thinner bezels. I mean, there will come a point at which, if you keep halving and halving and halving something, then eventually there's really no change at all. And I feel like we're edging towards the kind of the literal steel edges of the iPhone's frame at this point, or titanium or aluminum.
Does it say how thin they are going to be? I mean, they're pretty thin. I'm looking at my iPhone 16 Pro right now, and I don't know what it is, maybe a millimeter or and a half.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much left to go to the point at which you then say, well, let's just get rid of them altogether. But they are going to be thinner across the line. I would anticipate that the Pros would have thinner bezels than the regular ones, but It doesn't say that. It says across the lineup, this new LiPo technology will be used. We make the note that actually this technology is going to be rolled out across the industry, so not just on iPhones, but many Android manufacturers are also expected to use this technology in their next-gen displays. And the thing which interests me most about this rumor is something dynamic island something. That it's a little bit fuzzy what they're saying here, but that something is going to change with the dynamic island on the new iPhone 17 lineup, and it's software related. But according to the rumor, we haven't seen it in the betas of iOS 26 that have shipped so far. So it sounds like the clever folks at Cupertino have got something up their sleeves there. I was trying to think, how would this be an iPhone 17 feature and not something which would be for all of the iPhones that have a dynamic island? And I guess maybe this means that the dynamic island is a different shape. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but there were those rumors, but I think it's maybe next year's iPhone that would move the cutout to the top left-hand corner and make it circular. Or, is this a sign we might be seeing that this year instead?
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I mean, this account, Digital Chat Station, I was like, who are these guys? But it turns out they have like 3 million followers.
Yeah.
And have a bit of a track record. They correctly predicted some iPhone 15 stuff apparently. But it was kind of like they buried the lead right at the very bottom. Oh yeah, by the way, and it wasn't just like a feature. It sounded like a new dynamic island style UI.
Yeah.
Like the whole UI was going to change, which maybe that's a translation mistake or something like that, or someone just getting a bit overexcited. And of course, they gave no other details. The dynamic island though has adapted, hasn't it? There's so much more information you can get in it now, especially with like live activities and stuff like that. And it's turned out to be a really useful thing, like for music and for changing speakers. I often, if I've got something playing on my HomePod, I'll often hit that and change where the output is and stuff like that. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea, isn't it, that they're going to do that? But do you think it's going to be? I don't know. Could it be just for the iPhone 17?
I mean, usually how this happens, and I think what the most likely thing is, they've miniaturized the components inside the actual cutout itself a little bit, and they're going to use that extra screen space they have to maybe like allow you to have more things in the dynamic island, or allow you to have more icons or bigger text that's like closer to where it is right now. Because, if you were to use this new user interface, quote unquote new user interface on the old one, it would be showing things behind the cutout. The actual physical elements will be smaller, but usually the other part of that though is what I would say as a counterpoint against myself is that usually any changes at all to the display are rumored. They're part of the rumor. Like we have this rumor that the bezels are going to get smaller, but nothing else has indicated that the cutout is going to get smaller. And in fact, I think we had a story a couple weeks ago that said, no, the cutout isn't actually getting smaller until next year or the year after that. But
so it's very mysterious. I mean, the only other thing that I was thinking about, and I think you touched on it there, was obviously iOS 26 has got the liquid glass material, and that is always like semi-transparent. But the whole point of the digital island or dynamic island is that it has a flat black background. And one of the slightly incongruous things there is that means it will be the only part of the UI for the next generation iPhones that will be flat. But I don't see any obvious way that they could bring liquid glass to the dynamic island, because as soon as you start putting like highlights and reflection and refraction in it, then you'll be able to see the cutout, which will be like this great big black silhouette sitting there, unless it's, as you said, Griffin, a smaller cutout, maybe not the kind of circular top left cutout, but a smaller capsule, which then enables them to do something visually more eye-popping for the 17 phones.
Or perhaps they make it like sort of a gradient where it's, glass on the bottom, but then it has like a, fluid gradient up to the pitch black around the top. There's a lot they could do there. It's interesting. I mean, the dynamic island is like this, blend of hardware and software, really. Like they want you they want it to feel like it's, the software interacting with the physical hardware itself. So it could be very easy for them to tie changes to the dynamic island to a physical release, even if nothing has actually changed.
That was my best guess, that the smaller capsule of the cutout would enable them to do something a bit liquidly glassy with the dynamic island, which they couldn't do with the larger cutout. Maybe, but yeah, it's an odd part of the rumor, and it's the most intriguing bit.
And my only hope with the slightly smaller bezels is that they won't take the opportunity to make the displays bigger, and they'll just make the phones a few millimeters smaller, which is what I always hope for. I'd really like it to be, maybe a few centimeters smaller, but I can take millimeters.
Oh, you're craving a mini iPhone.
Fractions of a millimeter.
I was just the only other parts of the rumor to touch on it. It's kind of confirming the camera bar at the top, and that the Apple logo would move down to accommodate it, which I think we've heard so many times now that I almost regret that I just said that, because, well, duh. But, they're not going to not move the Apple logo if it's going to be all bunched up against the new camera strip.
People seem to be losing their minds about that. The Move logo. Everyone's thinking, "Oh my God, this is a huge disaster. It's going to be awful."
I saw that. I didn't understand why. I mean, they'll put the logo in the best place for the hardware, and it's like, how is that difficult?
I mean, the advantage that it had being in the dead center of the Qi charging ring and also the MagSafe ring is that if you're putting it on a Qi charger, now you know exactly like where the center of the circle is. So you can think, I can put my finger there. That's the center of the Qi charger, and there's the back of my phone. I'll just put it right there so that it lines up. But now they're moving it. I think it looks like it'll be sort of at the intersection between like the ring and the little line underneath it for the MagSafe.
The alignment
kind of at
thing,
the so you'll have to learn a new, less intuitive way to line it up. But now it's like, there's the center of the Qi charger. There's the Apple logo at the bottom of it. So now I have to kind of adjust it down an inch, and that's where it is.
I don't think anyone knew that anyway, Griffin. So
I didn't know
except you. So so no big change. But that's a good point, and I wish I'd known that actually. Yeah, that would have been a great little tip to tell everybody.
Well, the clue is when you get the Apple the clear MagSafe case from Apple, you can see like the Apple logo in the center and then the big circle exactly around it.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying that previously the MagSafe circle aligned with the Apple logo, and now the Apple logo is moving down, or maybe they'll move the MagSafe circle down as well.
That would be weird. I don't know if based on the images of where they have the Apple logo, I don't know if they'd have enough room there. And I don't think you'd want that, because there's always all the MagSafe wallets and things that are perfectly sized to fit on like the bottom 2/3 of the phone. And if it's moved down, then you'd have like your wallet extending an inch past the bottom of your phone when you snap it on.
It's an opportunity to sell new accessories.
Yeah, right. They never underestimate that.
Yeah.
One last thing, I'm going to talk about the colors, Graham.
So the iPhone 17 Air, this rumor is that it might be coming in 4 new colors. And these colors are muted, shall we say. They're the kind of colors that, as a regular listener to the CultCast, I know that certain people like Lewis do not like these muted Pro colors because reasons. But anyway, so I think Lewis is going to be disappointed once again that we have subtle, tasteful, muted colors rather than the kind of 80s pop fluorescent colors that Lewis favors.
He bought the purple iPhone 15, I think it was, which turned out to be like this kind of hideous, muddy grey. And he's never gotten over it. He and his wife both got them. They were so excited, and they're so disappointed. You've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, so they've got black and white and also gold and light blue. Yeah. Except these are not the bright colors that are currently on the iPhone 16 line that I understand have been pretty popular. These are like the iPad Air colors that are like, a tall glass of water with like a single drip of lemonade in it that becomes like slightly yellow. That's the color of gold that you're looking at here.
Is that supposed to be gold?
It's like pastel gold. They are pastel colors, aren't they? But related to this rumor is something that, to me, a rumor that was published on Cult of Mac today. I was just reading before we started this about the iPhone 17 Air being more kind of pro in its specs, and these more pro colors kind of ties into that. And to me, that was a no-brainer. I couldn't really ever think of the iPhone Air being like a budget iPhone. That didn't make sense to me, because thin in Apple's lexicon is always premium. So, which actually makes me think maybe it won't be called the Air at all, because Air, for whatever reason, has become associated with the entry level in the Mac lineup. So,
or the mid range, right? The kind of is it more mid range?
Yeah. So it makes me think, maybe they need to come up with a another name for this. It's going to be a super svelte executive phone.
Well, they always do the muted colors for the Pro line stuff, and the more the brighter poppy colors for the entry level stuff. Which I don't know. They do look kind of very unexciting, don't they?
Yeah, I think everybody can believe this rumor, but I guess the open question is, are these also going to be the entry-level iPhone 17 colors?
Well, they would be more colorful, wouldn't they? Because the iPhone 16 right now, the entry-level stuff, they've actually got beautiful colors. I really like those colors.
Related to this rumor was that the Pro phones might be reverting back to aluminum, which sounded odd to me, but I was maybe misunderstanding that. But after all these years of titanium, and before that, what did we have? Steel. Yeah, and then going back to aluminum for the Pro phones, I think it's a bit odd. So there's a number of things in these rumors that don't entirely add up to me.
Yeah, never believe the rumors, especially when you're reading about Mac. All right. Anyway, so should we move on? Let's talk about Jeff Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Williams, who everyone thinks he's really a boring character, but he was the number one candidate to be the next CEO when Tim Cook eventually steps down. Jeff Williams, if people don't know, is Apple's chief operating officer, and he announced on Tuesday this week that he's going to be stepping down later this year, although he's going to be starting to give up some of his duties in July. He has, he's responsible for a whole bunch of things at Apple. Overseeing, the all sorts of engineering of the Apple Watch and Apple's sort of sprawling global operations. And so I guess he's got a lot on his plate that he's going to be handing off. For the moment, his position is being filled by Sabi Khan, who is currently the Senior Vice President of Operations, which was Jeff Williams' old job. So Khan has followed him into his successive roles. So wherever, Jeff Williams has gone, Sabi Khan follows behind him. And these guys actually have worked together along with another candidate, which I'll talk about in a minute. These have been Tim Cook's key lieutenants throughout his whole career at Apple.
My impression of Jeff Williams was always that, if Tim Cook were hit by a bus on his way to Apple Park tomorrow, then Jeff Williams would be the immediate person to step in. But
wouldn't?
Or no, he would be Jeff Williams would be the new CEO automatically if Tim Cook suddenly dies of a heart attack. But it's never really made a lot of sense to me of Jeff Williams being the long-term replacement CEO, because Jeff Williams is only a few years younger than Tim Cook. Yeah. And Tim Cook is already at retiring age. So, Tim Cook retires next year. Jeff Williams is CEO for 6 months before he starts retiring too. That's never made sense to me.
But when they talk about retiring age, like 60 is the new 40 or whatever. I don't necessarily see Tim Cook retiring until he really wants to. And, I could totally imagine him being there for another 10 years.
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of his, his abilities, yeah, he could definitely be there for 10 years. But he, I think, has ambitions to go into philanthropy.
Oh, really?
And I kind of made that up, but... He's said a couple of times that he's interested in giving away his money. And of course, he's quite the activist CEO, in his own quiet way, and has done a lot of progressive things at Apple. And it's hard to tell though, because if he wants to have an impact, his biggest impact is at Apple. And I think sort of stepping away and starting to give away this huge fortune that he's accumulated would be interesting, but probably of lesser impact. The stuff he could do at Apple has a much, getting into green technology, for example. He could do pushing Apple into green initiatives is going to have far more impact than he could do as a private citizen. But then again, maybe he wants to sort of, he's not going to be around forever. Maybe he's interested in looking at the last 10 years, 10, 15 years of his life as a private philanthropist.
So I've always thought that, if you count Jeff Williams out, he might be the immediate next CEO, but not really the long-term replacement. I've always thought in these discussions that Sabi Khan has been overlooked, not only because he's, the next rung down in the chain below Jeff Williams, but also he's been there a long time and he hasn't really gotten a lot of attention. There's the famous story of Tim Cook in the meeting and there's a problem with their logistics in China, and Tim Cook says, "Why isn't anybody solving this?" And then at the end of the meeting, he like turns to one person and says, "Go over there right now." And then he like, the person like gets on a flight with the clothes on his back and flies to China. That was Sabi Khan in that story, and that was like 15 years ago, and he's still there. Like, I've always thought that he would be a good candidate until this story broke just earlier this week, and I looked it up. And Sabi Khan also isn't that much younger than either of them. He's 58 already. So,
All right.
I think it's interesting that also illustrates the fact that Apple is a company with a very low staff turnover at the senior executive level. So people tend to have long tenures there. So you do get these, what they say, people who bleed six colors, I believe is one of the phrases. And,
that's a different blog.
And a corollary to that is it's one of those companies that tends to promote from within rather than bringing people from outside. And when they have tried to bring people from outside, and I can think about the previous two executives for retail, it just did not work out well. So Apple, I think, has a fairly unique way of running itself. The businesses are not separate profit centers. It's all one big profit center, and there's lots of things that people come in from the outside and it makes no sense to them the way that Apple works. So at a senior level, you kind of need people that sort of live and breathe the Apple way. The other thing that I find interesting,
that team player ethos.
Yeah, and the candidates that we're talking about here are all, with the exception of, say, John Turnus, we haven't mentioned yet. They're non-product people. These are like operations people, and that I don't think is a mistake either. I think post Steve Jobs, it's been quite a deliberate decision that the leadership are the sort of non-product people. And because if you had an auteur CEO like Steve Jobs, he would want to put his mark on, or she would want to put their mark on the company. And I just don't think that's right for Apple. So I think, I don't think it would have ever worked for Johnny Ive to be the CEO of Apple, because I think there can only be one Steve Jobs for Apple. Not to say Steve Jobs was that unique, but Steve Jobs was unique for Apple as being the sort of founder visionary. And now they have a structured organization to move that vision forward. And I feel like if they brought in a product-oriented CEO, it would inevitably change Apple. And I don't think that's what Apple wants or needs.
That's funny, because people were saying the exact opposite thing when Jobs died.
And I don't agree with them.
That's exactly what they needed. There's definitely going to come from inside for sure. There's no way they're going to bring in an outside candidate. And Apple University, which was Jobs' attempt to sort of inculcate his DNA into the company, run by what's his name, David Ptolemy, I think. He was a Harvard business professor. He's created I think he was there for about a decade, created this extremely comprehensive internal management training program based upon case studies about how Apple launched the iPod and the iPhone and comes up with products. It's pretty comprehensive, and I think all of the executives go through this. Even I'm not sure how far down the train it goes. I'm pretty sure all the managers go. I'm sorry, beg your pardon. Almost everybody goes through some kind of Apple University training. And this is sort of to pass down that, Steve Jobs' way of doing things inside the company. And obviously it's been very, very successful. And it's also like Horace Didier, he's a longtime Apple analyst that runs a Simco. He talks about how Apple is one of the world's, one of the business world's few functional organizations. And the functional organization being that it's made up of experts in all their different particular fields, and it organized like the army or the armed forces. That's another example of a big functional organization where you have all these experts that are working together. And like you said, it's not siloed. It's not broken up into different profit centers. It's not, each different part of the organization isn't run for its own benefit. It's run for the entire company's benefit. Everybody works together. So, and this is the kind of thing I think, when they did this last time, they brought in an outside CEO like Gil Amelio, who was heralded at the time as the savior of Apple. He was a turnaround specialist, and he was going to be able to turn Apple around, which actually was kind of true because
he gets a hard rap given that he's responsible for selecting OS X as the next operating system and hiring Steve Jobs. Two pretty good,
right.
That's a good rap sheet for a CEO.
It is. Yeah. He's forgiven for that one move. But it definitely was. It wasn't a success. And as you mentioned, Graham, I think that the two high-profile examples of where Apple's brought in an outside executive, Andrew Lawrence and what was his name, Dan Browett.
Yeah.
That he was a previous head of retail. I mean, he didn't even last it was very short, wasn't it? 6 months, I think.
Yeah.
Before he got put out in his ear. So I'll wrap up real quick. I was looking at the other candidates and I thought, well, there's this one person that no one talks about that I think is worth thinking about, is Deirdre O'Brien, and she's currently the head of Apple HR and the retail stores. She has this dual role. And the interesting thing about her, and she's an Apple veteran, she's been there for 30 years, even longer than Tim Cook. And she, along with, it was Jeff Williams, Sabi Khan, and Deirdre O'Brien. These were Tim Cook's 3 key lieutenants when he was coming up through the ranks himself, and his 3 key lieutenants when he took over as CEO. And the one thing that Deirdre O'Brien's interesting about her career is that she has held that job. She was head of operations too. She came up through the operations the same way that Tim Cook did and Jeff Williams did. And so she was previously the head of operations, and then they moved her across to doing the HR stuff and then the retail stores. And the same way that sometimes when Steve Jobs had a tricky position to fill, or there was an opening, he gave it to Tim Cook. So Tim Cook he started out in operations, but then he got sales, and then he got services. So 3 huge areas of the company. And the same thing happened with Deirdre O'Brien. When she was running HR, which is much bigger than it was because of the retail stores. There are so many people to take care of, so many staff. When they needed someone to fill in for retail, Cook layered it onto top of Deirdre O'Brien instead of finding somebody else to take care of it. So there were some interesting parallels there, I thought, with the way that he trusted Deirdre O'Brien. She's obviously one of the key leaders that he has at his disposal, and he's trusted to be able to take on massive new responsibilities, which I thought was interesting. But of course, she has the same problem as all the other people we've been talking about. Age. She's not much younger. She's about. It's never been officially announced, but she's 60, I think. So, she's only got a couple of years, 4 years younger than Tim Cook, and a couple of years younger than Sabi Khan. But anyway, interesting. I think she's had an interesting career there at Apple, and it'll also be in line, I think, with Tim Cook's sort of activist CEO modus operandi. That maybe he would recommend a woman to fulfill this role. That'd be sort of an interesting, I think that's definitely a possibility.
I have a spitball idea. What do we think about Lisa Jackson? She currently heads up a lot of the environmental things at Apple. Like she's always the person who they bring on screen at the keynotes to talk about, Apple 2030, this big environmental goal that they're trying to hit. I've done absolutely no research, but she looks like she's younger than the other two.
Yeah.
I just had this idea just now, but Lisa Jackson, what's our instant reaction to that?
Well, I'd say she has no operations experience. No.
Well, I imagine she must be working rather closely with the operations team if she's trying to, implement Apple 2030.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, for sure. And who knows? I mean, do you need those things? I mean, one of the interesting things too, I think, about when Tim Cook was working under Steve Jobs, is that it looked like he was being groomed. If you look at his career afterwards, and you think, oh, okay, well, Jobs, gave him this job and he gave him that job, and he was sort of moved around a little bit in all the organization. He got to be familiar with a lot of different parts of Apple, which, of course, was the thing about Jobs. I think that distinguished him as a CEO. He had his finger in everything.
Yeah.
The advertising, the product development, and that's been pulled back a little bit, with Cook and with subsequent executives. But I think, if you look at Deirdre O'Brien's career, that was the one thing that I noticed too, that she looked like she'd been introduced to all these different parts of the operation, which kind of looked like, possibly a grooming type situation, which Jackson hasn't had. She's been given a few extra jobs, I think, but they've been mostly with in that focus, with the environmental initiatives.
Yeah, I think one of the things that strikes me here is a mistake it's really easy to make is we have this archetype of the Steve Jobs CEO, but Steve Jobs was very exceptional as a CEO, and CEOs are not normally involved in decisions about product or anything like that. And I think Apple under Steve Jobs was a very different company in so many ways to what it is today. But, it was a fraction of the company in terms of turnover and in terms of product complexity. I was thinking about this with WWDC a couple of weeks ago, and all the different sessions, like it's overwhelming the number of sessions. The number of different products and technologies that Apple does now is vast, and it's so different from the company that Steve Jobs headed up with his 4-product matrix. It's a different world now. It's actually, I would say, impossible really for a CEO to perform the Steve Jobs role of, having hands-on decision making on every single product, because there's just too many for any one person to do. This is a company that's 10 times the size or more. And so I think that's something to factor in too. And a CEO job, I don't think it should be fun. This is a job that's about capital allocation as much as anything. This is stuff that we don't really cover in this podcast. So when we're thinking about it, and everyone goes to people like John Turnus because he's a handsome chap that presents things at keynotes. But he might be the best hardware leader that Apple has ever had, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a CEO person. CEOs are actually normally quite boring. That it's only because we have this Steve Jobs archetype that we have that expectation. So I think that's why Deirdre O'Brien is an interesting example. I find it hard to imagine her presenting Apple keynotes in the way that Tim Cook and Steve Jobs did.
Well, go back and look at Tim Cook's early keynote presentations. They're awful. I mean, he was absolutely terrified, quite rightly.
He was. But the only reason I can't imagine her doing it is because I've never seen her do it. She's a behind-the-scenes person. But I don't think there's anything wrong with a CEO being they don't need to be the charismatic leader. They need to make the tough calls on capital allocation and stuff like that.
I mean, that's not an expectation that we have of literally any other CEO. Like, no one's ever like, the CEO of Walmart doesn't give good keynote. Who is that? We don't even know. Yeah. Like, it's kind of an unreasonable expectation that we put on Apple CEO just because, we're Apple fans and we like to watch them. But also a bit of real-time follow-up. Lisa Jackson was born in 1962. So that also doesn't solve that problem. Yeah. And I guess she takes good care of herself. So I thought she was younger.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about everything new in the iOS 26 Beta 3, which actually makes a really pretty big change, quite hilarious change, I think.
I think we'll maybe, I feel like we're going to have a lot to say about that, so maybe I'll save that one to the end. But quick rundown of changes in the third beta. It's been another 2 weeks, so thank God it's a little less buggy this time. I'll say that. iOS 26 Beta 3 makes the colors of Control Center toggles a little brighter. It's a brighter shade of blue. This is a fun one. So on macOS, I think ever since Yosemite, you've been able to shake the mouse cursor and make it really big so you can easily find it. That's now on the iPad. Now that you have the freeform Mac-like windowing on the iPad, you can shake your cursor. It'll grow really huge.
That's actually a very, very understated, underappreciated feature. Like it's super handy. I do it all the time.
The Safari menu that shows your bookmarks, reading list, history is much bigger than before. It now fills up the entire screen, whereas before it was kind of like half height. And it has this recently saved section on top that shows you the recent bookmarks and items you've added to your reading list. I've heard a lot of people disliking this. I'm kind of ambivalent about it. This is a change that I'm not happy about, though. Now, when you enter multitasking mode, what you're used to seeing is, the app that you're currently using nudges over to the right so that the first thing that you can tap is the second most recent app. But now it doesn't do that anymore. You swipe up and it just stays there. And you then have to swipe over to the next app if you want to use the next app, which is an interesting change. I don't know if it's a bug or whatever, but...
Okay, I haven't downloaded it yet, so I haven't had a chance to play around with it.
Yeah, they've also added more color options to the new iOS 26 wallpaper. They keep making changes to that with every beta. But the big one is that it significantly tones down the transparency in liquid glass, making the elements more frosted, a little more opaque. That improves readability, which was a common complaint that we've heard on this very show, but... It does make the liquid glass effect, like the glassiness of it, much less flashy and much less, I think, dramatic, and in my opinion, much less cool looking. Yeah. I've always been on board with liquid glass since it was unveiled. I've always thought it was a neat look. Honestly, like my biggest complaint with Tahoe putting aside all of the user interface regressions, is the fact that it isn't more liquid glassy. It's, a slightly different transparency effect, but it's not animated like it is on iOS. But yeah, it's much more opaque. Maybe Apple is going to continue to tweak the translucency with every beta, and they're going to find a nice happy medium. But
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? When it first came out, it was like the whole internet lost its mind. Oh my god, that's completely unreadable. So and now they've made it, frosted glass, and now everyone's going the opposite way. They're all freaking out, like, what happened to liquid glass? Now they've ruined it. Now it's just like, it looks like a bad sort of Windows Vista implementation.
From the developer end, Apple has bifurcated it. Like, they made the default liquid glass style a little more opaque, but then they added, like, if you're using Swift UI, you can use like a clear glass style that'll make it more like the first two betas. And I think what Apple is going with it is that, buttons and things that don't have text and like just symbols. If you have like a symbol like on a button floating over your content, then you can use the clear glass style there, and you'll get more of the visual warping effect behind it. But if you have
They
text,
call that lensing.
like in the Safari address bar or the bottom tab bar in music or podcasts, then it'll use the more frosted style so that you can read the text easier. I mean, personally, I didn't have a problem reading the text in the first two betas, but I'm also the youngest person on this show.
Neither. If you looked at the screenshots of on X and a screenshot, it could be hard to make out. But when you're using it, when it's dynamic, when it's moving, I've had no problem at all.
Yeah,
I
because
don't have any legibility problem.
Because when it's in motion, you see the warping behind it, and you can. It's easier for your brain to separate, the background from the text on top of it.
Right.
I thought it was a hot mess. I mean, it's really interesting to hear you two say that, but there were many instances where I saw things where there were serious like legibility problems. I encountered those all the time, and but I would say I'm sad about this because the normal liquid glass state now being more frosty, you lose the liquid glass effect almost altogether, I think. So it sort of goes back to the more diffusion look that we had before. The lensing effect you can hardly see because it's so frosty. So I do think that's a shame. I think it's a shame what we've lost, but at the same time, I don't know what else Apple could have done. And then with the normal and the clear modes of liquid glass, Griffin, that you were touching on, in the developer sessions, they're kind of really explicit that you're kind of not allowed to use the clear mode for almost anything apart from the example that you gave of like if it's a media player, you might use it for the media controls in the middle of the screen, but even then you need to put a dimming layer behind it. I
mean, the thing is, like, Apple has been designing this, allegedly they say they've been designing this for years. Why didn't they encounter this? Did none of the designers ever think to put like at least try and see how it looks when you have it on like a garish color background, and then, you can't read the text as well. And like they didn't realize that until they shipped the thing.
I suspect they had
they've been designing this for so long,
just like the one that we've had, that there was a different views. Some people were saying this is a hot mess, and other people were saying I have no problem with it. Everyone agreed it looked more cool when it was less frosty. So they maybe thought, let's put it out there and see if we get away with it.
Yeah.
Well, that is the whole point of a beta, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's to test this out in the real world, see how it lands.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's probably gonna like seesaw from one extreme to another until we end up with some kind of happy medium at the end.
It's frustrating that they showed us the super cool looking version only for 4 weeks, and then, oh no, we can't have that anymore.
Right. And now it's
well, then why did you make it if you weren't going to ship it?
Well, I do love that lensing effect, and so I really hope they can find a way to show the lensing off a bit more whilst still having it a little bit more frosty.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play this one out. All right, so let's move on to the how-to section, and this one is actually I'm really interested in because obviously I've been reading a lot about AI. And about vibe coding, and Graham, who's a developer, Graham has his own app called Reps and Sets. And Graham, you've been doing a pretty big overhaul, and you're not a programmer, but you've been using vibe coding, AI vibe coding, to help you rewrite your app. So you're going to tell us about it, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's something I'm so excited about that I was, when I heard that I was coming on, I was really keen to share this because I think it's something a lot of people might get interested in as well. It's like I'm obsessed with this. Every evening right now, I'm fooling around with this and making some really great progress. So what it is vibe coding is the term for writing code using an AI. And in my case, I've been using Claude from Anthropic and using it through Cursor. So Cursor is an IDE, so an integrated development environment, a bit like Xcode. And it basically, using Claude with Cursor is the equivalent of using Claude with Code Assist in Xcode 26. But right now you can only use AI in Xcode 26 if you're running on Tahoe, and I'm not ready to install Tahoe on my production machine. So this is the reason why I'm currently using Cursor. Cursor is also an amazingly good deal because right now the price is $20 a month for all you can eat on Claude. And that's a pretty awesome deal, though what I heard this week, I think the prices are going to be going up. So swoop in now and enjoy the cheap Claude while you can.
For a week, yeah.
So the background of this is I had a fitness app, which I developed with my partner 12, 13 years ago. We actually started working on it in iOS 5. We shipped it in iOS 6. And there's a couple of pictures I'll share of what it originally looked like, because it was a really old school iOS 6 app when iOS looked all shiny and glossy as it does again today. And we've been developing this app for years, and I have a background in marketing. I ran a web design agency for years. So I've got a fair amount of experience of designing user interface and working with developers. And I know some code, like I know HTML and CSS well. But beyond that, my coding skills are very, very limited. So what happened was, when you develop an app, there's this idea that you can kind of like put this app on the App Store and then sit back and watch the money roll in. But of course, it doesn't work that way, because every year at WWDC, Apple updates its platforms. And then there's a lot of work for developers to do to update their apps, not just to take on board all the cool new features, but sometimes to just get it compiling and working on the new platform. Mm-hmm. The keep it working thing is, if you've got an app which, like our code, was like 13 years old, lots of the stuff just doesn't work anymore. It's deprecated and Apple just doesn't support things. And so what I found when I was trying to make some minor changes to my app reps and sets last year was, when I compiled it, it was unstable. It just kept crashing, and really trying to figure out what was causing the crashes. And I couldn't, it's well beyond my means. And my partner who'd worked on the original code, a couple of other developers that I'd worked with, we had one brilliant, talented developer who did lots of the code for me originally. But the thing is, that was 13 years ago, and now he's like some, super senior. He's definitely doesn't have time for me and my little app, or only if I was calling in a favor, and I don't want to, be a burden on anyone. So,
okay.
I thought it's the end of the app. I've got no one to develop it. The whole app basically needs to be rewritten from scratch, and that's not going to happen. So my humble little app, that's the end. And then Martin, my partner, was saying, well, why don't you try Cursor with, Claude AI and see how far you get with that. To cut a long story short, I'm, halfway through redeveloping the app, and stuff which would take a regular developer months to do, you can kind of do in weeks. Some like there was a feature that I needed to implement last night. I needed to add the ability to log a pace-based workout, say running. And so I needed the user to be able to enter pace and distance and time. And that's a bit complicated because those three things are interdependent, and then they needed to be persisted on the database as well. And that's the stuff which is way beyond what I know how to do. I just described it to Claude in natural language, and Claude's first stab at it was not at all bad, and then I talked through with Claude a few little, tweaks to improve it. And by the end of the night, I had that feature implemented and checked into GitHub, and that is mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing. I was going to say the same word, mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. You can talk to a machine and in natural English language and tell it what you want, and it does it. And it does all the technical stuff in the background.
It's so pleasing because I just watch it writing the code for me. And, it's like, whoa. And you learn to be very kind of, you have to know what you want. And this was actually, in terms of turning this into a how-to, I thought I would give some pointers. I think if you are someone that has got any background in web development, if you just like maybe did some HTML and CSS at college, that's going to help you with this.
Not least because the developer tools on Apple's end have also changed dramatically since then. Like you probably wrote the original version of your app in, Objective-C, and now there's the Swift programming language with Swift UI.
Well, this is it. Swift UI, which is the modern way to build the front end for apps on all Apple's platforms, is super simple. And what I was going to say is what I would recommend if you're interested in this. If you think you might be able to do it, then I would say I bet you can do it. And what I would do is start, if you haven't already, looking at the Swift tutorials that Apple has in Swift Playground. They're kind of kooky. They have like robots walking around this 3D world. And you might think, well, it's very childish. But if you have no background in programming, that's not just teaching you Swift, though it is teaching you Swift, it's teaching you the basics of programming as well, which then, if you know Swift, to be honest, it's not such a leap to learn any other programming language that you want as well, because all of them are kind of similar in that respect. So it's well worth spending the time on Apple's amazing free tutorials in Swift. And what I suggest after you've done that, which is only going to take you a weekend if you really stick at it, is then to look at Apple's Swift UI tutorials. So that's what Griffin just mentioned. It's the modern way to build Apple apps. And the really cool thing here is, when we developed the original iPhone app 13 years ago, it was just an iPhone app, and in Objective-C. Now with Swift UI, the thing that blows my mind is, as I'm developing this app with Claude, I'm running it on my Mac, on my iPad, on my iPhone, and this is a cross-platform app. I don't have Vision Pro, but I'm going to test it on Vision Pro as well. There are some things that are a little bit tricky. Because this is a fitness app, I actually want it to run on Apple TV as well. Because some people like to work out looking at the TV screen, so it actually kind of makes sense. But Apple TV has a lot less UI things than other platforms, so you end up having to put a lot of logic in to sort of simplify it for Apple TV. So I think I'm going to make Apple TV a different target, so it's a different code base to the others. And Apple Watch has to be a different code base, but obviously I need a watch app because it's a fitness app. It's write once and run on several of Apple's platforms. And some of the views that you build for one platform, you can then use in different targets. So, if I have a list of exercises for a particular workout, then that's a view that I can then pull into my watch app as well. So you don't need to redo everything from scratch. So that's Swift UI. And the course that Apple has, it's a free tutorial. It takes about 4 hours to do. We'll include a link in the show notes. And it tells you basically everything that you need to know about Swift UI. And it takes you through this dummy project that Apple's put together called Landmarks. It's a pretend app for browsing landmarks, and you can mark your favorite landmarks, and it integrates with Apple Maps. And it shows you how to do all of that. And it shows you how to put all the landmarks into a database and then pull them up into a list. And that's just 4 hours of your time, and boom, then you know that. And although Claude can write all the code for you, the thing is you do need to be able to, on some level, understand what Claude's doing. And in this sense, the other thing, and you'll know this if you've ever used any AI, is like if you ask a dumb question, you'll get a dumb answer. The more precise your question is, the better the output that you'll get. So I very much also recommend completely familiarizing yourself with Apple's human interface guidelines. And so we'll include a link to those if you haven't looked at them before. But the thing to learn there is you want to know the name of all of the different important controls and frameworks that Apple has. So for example, my fitness app, it uses a tab bar combined with navigation split view, and that's the basic premise of it. And I need to know. I have in mind what it looks like. I need to know what the name of those elements are, so that I can tell Claude that's what I want. Otherwise, if you don't know what Apple's user interface elements are called, Claude may well still understand what you mean, because this is vibe coding, and so Claude is actually surprisingly good. But the thing is, if you're not strict with Claude about what you want, Claude starts making decisions. And the point is, and sometimes I actually quite clever. Sometimes I leave Claude some flexibility to see what Claude comes up with, but mostly because I'm a designer and I have very clear ideas of what I want. then I'm quite specific with Claude about how I want things to work. But the more latitude you give Claude, I guess the less it's your app at the end of the day. You haven't really put your mark on it.
But the advantage of SwiftUI specifically is that the code that SwiftUI generates is incredibly readable. Like if you have it as a starting point, then you can see, oh, well, I'd like this to be rounded instead of squared, just add dot rounded on the list of modifiers in SwiftUI and suddenly this button is rounded. SwiftUI, it's not like you try looking at Objective-C code and I think everybody would be like scared away and run 30 feet in the other direction because it's just absolute gibberish of like colons and letters and square brackets. Yeah. But I think a normal person could look at SwiftUI code and be like, oh, well, once I get to here, I kind of understand what this is saying because it's just a very readable syntax.
Well, I think that was one of the design principles of Swift from the start, is they wanted to make it somewhat more human readable, and to some extent they definitely did achieve that. But when it comes to the SwiftUI bit, that is, just the user interface component, that is really nice and simple. That said, especially on the 26 OSs, but even on the previous ones, there are a lot of bugs and they are very, very annoying. And one of a funny thing to share with you here is, there's this talk that Apple might integrate Claude into Swift, or use Anthropic and Claude for the next generation, or Siri. That they might use Anthropic's Claude to power the next generation of Siri. And I found this really funny because I had spent a whole evening with Claude trying to get this property to persist on CloudKit, which is Apple's cloud database solution. And I just couldn't get it to work. And we tried all these different approaches. And I looked through all the documentation and I couldn't get it to work. And it was basically, we were doing a soft delete. So if you delete a workout, rather than just deleting from the database, we tag it as deleted in the database. So it's not shown in the list anymore, but we still have it. And there were a few reasons why I wanted to do that, couldn't get it to work. And in the end, I actually went to ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT what the problem was. And it turns out that was the term deleted is reserved in CloudKit, and that's not in Apple's documentation. But because it's reserved, and you can't use that, so we had to change it to is deleted instead of deleted. And then Claude said to me, "This is always the way with." It's literally wrote, "This is always the way for Apple developers, that you spend hours and hours trying to debug something when it's a failure in Apple's documentation that they had a reserved property and never told you about it." And I was thinking, yes, Claude, yes. And I was thinking, it's so funny. Like, does Apple really know what they're getting into with Claude? Because, I mean, Claude is my friend. And like my partner, Martin, just kept on saying to me, look, Claude is not your friend. Because I'm getting really fond of Claude now, and we spend ages he's like my buddy, and we're trying to solve these problems. And then it's that, honestly, this is the reason I would say, more than anything else, why I would, if you're curious, then I would say give it a go, because this is genuinely fun. And it's like doing an escape room or something. When you finally figure something out that's been bugging you for ages, it's just such a high. And this is like my favorite hobby ever, and I just totally recommend it. And so all those links will stick in the show notes, but especially if you've ever done web development before, or just know a little bit of HTML and CSS from college, or even if you don't, but you're interested enough to go through those 2 tutorials that I mentioned that will take you a weekend, I think you might get something out of this. Maybe you'll create the next TikTok.
And we'll have a link to your app, Reps and Sets, in the show notes. It's completely free and there's no in-app purchases. So
the current version of Reps and Sets is very crashy. So, but look out for the new one. Now, I did not imagine this was possible, but now I'm starting to think maybe I can get this out for the iOS 26 launch.
I was going to say, you think by the fall?
Hopefully. But I didn't think that would be possible. And now I'm starting to think, well, maybe it would be. And, then that's a great time to launch an app, because Apple likes to push apps that use all their new technology. So, I'm going to try for that. Right. We'll see how it goes.
If you want to add me to a test flight, I can check out the Vision Pro version for you.
Oh, yeah. I definitely want to do that. Yeah.
It's inspirational, but also scary. I mean, I've obviously got very, very mixed feelings about AI, but yeah, I'm trying to get into AI editing. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. I'm not sure that there's the tools, though, like the integration with WordPress and stuff like that, I don't think are there, which would which is what's really holding me back. Because if I can, I don't want it to spit out a load of content and then have to spend hours, trying to get it into the system. If there's a way to get into the system where you can just describe stuff, this would be game changing stuff. All right, cool. Well, that's very interesting, Graham. Thanks very much for that. I hate to hurry the things along, but we're running out of time. So we're going to quickly talk about today's featured setup, which you can see on the Cult of Mac website. And we've chosen one which I think is going to... Some people are going to be totally horrified by this, and some people might quite like it. It's a MacBook Pro rig, which I guess the most immediate thing that you notice is that there's these two beautiful Yamaha studio monitors. But the thing I noticed about this setup is that there's 2 or 3 of everything, which obviously gives you pause. Like, what's going on here? Why are there 2 headphones? Why are there 3 mice? And look at all those watches. Yeah. I guess that's his watch collection in the background there. I don't know. Do I like it? It's a bit of it does make you feel a bit itchy.
Mm-hmm. There will be a link in the show notes where you can look at the picture on the website. The thing about this is that this image is only of the desk. We don't see the rest of the room, but based on the image here, I don't know if I would want to, because that's just incredibly, it looks like a rat's nest, honestly. Like this.
Well, a well-organized one.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far.
Everything's lined up. Everything's lined up.
The window looks like it's running Windows, though. Just looking at that.
Oh, you're right.
That blue bar
that's
and
a Mac
grey
menu
at the
bar on
top.
the top.
It almost, and it looks like an old version of Windows, like Windows 95 or something. Windows 98.
Well, if you look at the post, I believe that's what Dave, who wrote the post, is explaining. The 3 mice here are actually for 3 different machines. One's a comfort, one's an ergonomic mouse, one's a productivity one, and one's a gaming mouse. So I suspect that maybe they're running Windows for games here.
And then the 3 drink mats. That's 1 drink for each computer.
Right. Is that what that's on the left there? Yeah, the 2 blue and the red thing.
Yeah, and he has this sort of pegboard behind the display, which is an interesting place because the display is blocking a good 40% of the pegboard, but the display is... Oh, no, it's not on an arm. It's just sort of sitting on this riser there. There's allegedly an M1 Max MacBook Pro in there somewhere, but I don't really know where it is. It's kind of buried.
Is it the one that's on the riser below the monitor?
Yeah. If you zoom in, you can sort of see the black there. He's got a lot of pens and pencils and things. Like he has these little, cute little organizers right next to the monitor that are just absolutely stuffed with pens. And then there's like some sort of leather thing inside the monitor riser with another set of pens that are more organized.
Even more pens,
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can just see something that looks like it might be Mac-like below that. And the thing I've just noticed is he's a serious muso because he's got those like foam acoustic stands for the speakers to sit in, right? Mm-hmm. Like you wouldn't do that unless you were like really serious about your sound, I think.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of like scissors and other tools on the left end there, like a brush. So this guy must do some sort of physical work, especially if he's got all those pens. Little journal to the left. So maybe he's really into journaling and stationery of some sort.
Yeah, because that's a wooden. That's like a wooden pen tray that he's got there on the riser, and those are probably some Mont Blancs and other fancy pens there. Mm-hmm. It's I like the pegboard idea. I've seen that in quite a few setups, and IKEA I think does a really nice pegboard, fairly inexpensive pegboard that you can put a lot of stuff on. Mm-hmm. But the pegboard's definitely like that's on trend.
I feel like this guy should just have a larger desk because it looks like the desk ends right at the edge of the picture because you can see like the sort of like in the very bottom left corner, you can see what looks to be like the other foot of the desk or leg. I think this person just needs a bigger desk because you don't want to be shuffling all 6 of your mice and keyboards and trackpads out of the way every time you want to write something down, which he must do often given the number of pens and booklets that he has around here. That's what I would suggest to this person. Get a larger desk.
I think he hasn't got space. Maybe this is like if you're space constrained, this is a brilliant way of jamming everything in.
Yeah. Well, everything really is jammed in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So, Griffin, we have a question from an anonymous this week. What's our reader question this week?
Yeah, so this is the new segment where we answer your questions about what to buy and what to do. You can leave a question for us by tapping the link at the top of our show notes to send us a text. An anonymous person writes, I have a 2018 MacBook Pro and I'm interested in upgrading. Should I buy the M4 MacBook Pro or wait for the M5 because I start grad school in August? So this is the annoying part of Apple releasing the MacBook Pros when they do. It's October or November, just after everybody has began school. So especially if you have a 2018 MacBook Pro, that's the older Intel one. It's not going to be supported for much longer. You really want to upgrade to Apple Silicon. I would say this. I think if you're okay with waiting for the M5 MacBook Pro, what I would say is the rumors suggest that the M5 is going to be a pretty minor upgrade over the M4. They're not doing another process shrink. We already got a massive performance leap with the M4. If you're already okay with waiting and you've made peace with starting grad school on your 2018 MacBook Pro, I would say wait for the M5 so that you can buy an M4 for cheaper and get a higher spec model.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. When's the M5 supposed to be coming out?
They've been coming out like clockwork every fall, except for the one time where the M3s were delayed by a few months into January. But I've been kind of surprised that they've been coming out with new M chips every single year. So I would assume October or November. But the thing is, I feel like you would notice, getting 2 terabytes of storage instead of 1 terabyte more than you would notice getting the M5 instead of the M4.
Yeah. That's a good advice. So get the M4, but wait until the M5 comes out because then you'll be able to get it at a steal.
It depends a little bit also, I guess, on what you're going to do with it, because if you're doing video editing or like running huge AI models or something very processor intensive, compiling apps, it's it will make a difference. But if you're just going to be using word processing and web browsing and stuff like that, it doesn't make a difference anyway, really. And part of me feels like, life is not a dress rehearsal. It's kind of like buy what you need when you need it. I would say for sure, it's like I wouldn't, buy an old iPhone in late August. I would wait. But there's only so much that you should wait for things, because the thing is, even if you get the new thing, it won't be the new thing forever. So, putting aside everything, all other things being equal, I think you kind of have to buy what you want when you want it. There's my philosophy in life. I probably shouldn't mention it, but I always do check the Mac Rumors buyer's guide to just see where we are in the cycle on a particular product.
Who? The what? What, Graham? Who? We're going to edit that out.
We'll edit that out. But it's useful to know where you're at, so you're making an informed decision. But I think there's only, you can never have the new thing forever. And so, within reason, I feel like when you need something, you should buy what you need.
And I think the chip probably is less important than things like the industrial design, the number of ports, like Griffin said, the amount of storage you're going to get. Those are probably more important, because the marginal gains on the new chip is what, 15-20% at most, unless they do something more like add a whole bunch of neural cores or other big upgrades like that, which is very unlikely.
I mean, yeah, like when I was briefly testing the M4 Mac Mini, I didn't really notice that big of a difference in speed until I was exporting video or exporting audio. But I did notice that I didn't like the position of the headphone jack on the front instead of the back, things like that. And I also had a little bit of a grudge on the M4 Mac Mini, because before it was announced, there was a brief window of time where I knew that I had the most recent Mac Mini, the most recent iPhone, and the most recent Vision Pro. And when the M4 Mac Mini came out, that broke that. And I'll probably never have all 3 of those things the same again.
Well, but right now the MacBook lineup is absolutely gorgeous. I think the industrial design is top notch. They've hit the sweet spot with things like ports and keyboards. The battery life is insane. The Apple Silicon, of course, is fantastic. The screens are absolutely beautiful. These are like by far I think we're in the golden age of the Mac and the MacBooks. These are going back 30 years, and they've never ever been better. These are absolutely wonderful computers. Mm-hmm. And they're cheap too. I mean, they're not cheap, but they're relatively cheap for what you're getting. These machines will last you for years and years. Lewis is still using an M1 MacBook, and it's perfectly. And he's not doing any heavy stuff, but for the work he's doing, absolutely perfectly fine. Handles everything with Aplomb.
Yeah. So if you have another question that you'd like to send in, you can hit the link at the top of the show notes. Send us a text. Let us know what ails you.
Great. Okay, so our review section this week, we are going to review a handheld video game console, and Griffin, please walk us through it.
Sure. I'm going to switch over to camera 2 here.
Oh, your desk is quite rustic, Griffin.
Oh, yes. I built it. This is I guess I'll briefly start with a review of the desk. This is a 6 foot wide by 2 foot deep, inch thick pine board.
Okay.
I bought 3 of them from Menards, and then just, the basic 4x4 legs on each corner. So I've got 36 square feet of desk in total because I built 3 of them simultaneously.
Nice.
It wraps all the way across the back end of my room and also on another table behind me on camera. But we have a very exciting handheld video game console to review today. The one that everybody's talking about. A purple square.
What? I was totally expecting a Switch 2.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I bought one of those last week. But this is the Playdate by Panic.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you're not familiar, this is a tiny little handheld console. It's bright yellow. It has a sort of magnetic case that you can put on top of it, very Apple-like. It has a 2.7 inch monochrome LCD display at 400 by 240. It kind of has like a mini Game Boy-ish look to it. But that's where the similarities end, because inside you have a modern 64-bit processor, 4 gigabytes of flash storage, 16 megabytes of RAM, built-in Wi-Fi, excellent build quality. As a little size comparison, here it is next to an original Nintendo DS, and you can just see how much smaller it is. It's about a fraction of the size, but the controls on it are really ideally sized for your hands. The D-pad is nice. The buttons are just perfectly spaced enough for you to be able to roll your thumb between A and B. And the kicker is that you don't just have the D-pad and 2 buttons. You also have an analog crank.
What is that for?
It flips out and then it spins around. So
Is that for powering it up before you dive into a game?
It charges by USB-C, but this is an extra device that you can use that or an extra control, so that you can have both analog and digital controls. Like the original Atari 2600 struggled with this because you would have there was the controller that had like the joystick on the top and the analog one that had the dial that you can spin, but this has both of them built in, so you can play a bunch of different fun kinds of games on it. And of course, when you power it on, you can use the crank to flip through the user
cool.
interface, scroll through all your
nice.
games really quick.
Yeah.
So
And you can play,
this is
like-
designed by Teenage Engineering, isn't it? Am I right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And Panic, of course, is they're out of Oregon, I think, and they were famous for Transmit. I'm a software company.
yeah, and they also make
Before.
Coda, which is
Yeah.
another IDE. But you also notice when you turn it on, although this is a black and white LCD display, I mean, this is much brighter than a Game Boy. It's not backlit, but it's just so much more reflective. The pixels are so tiny, like it's very high resolution, very smooth, very easy to see. I've never had problems like seeing it in ordinary indoor lighting.
Yeah, the frame rate looks great, but it does look a little bit dim to me.
Okay, yeah, I might be able to bring an extra light down here.
Okay, yeah, that is a bit clearer.
You've got
yeah.
built-in speakers that are quite loud.
But how long have you had it? Do you? Because this to me is like totally the kind of thing that I would buy and I would play with it and think it was really cool, and then I would put it on a shelf and never touch it again.
I mean, the great
how
thing
much
about
like
it-
staying power does it have in terms of maintaining your interest?
The great thing about it, like one of its gimmicks, is that when you get your Playdate and first set it up, you'll automatically get what they call like season 1 of games. And I've started playing a game here, and you can see the blend of the analog and digital controls. Like you have the D-pad, but you can also spin around the crank to great effect and combine them that way. But when you get season 1 of games, what you get are 2 new games automatically downloaded onto your Playdate every single week for, I think, like a good 2 or 3 months or so worth of games. So this is all the season 1 games that you get. they automatically download, and then you can just like unwrap them, so to speak, and have another 2 new games to play for the week. And then they also recently launched season 2 of another set of, I don't know how many games it is. I think like 24 games or so. And season 2 just started a few weeks ago, so they're still releasing them. And everybody who has a Playdate is like discovering these games simultaneously week after week. I think they have like a Discord where people are talking about them or on social media. So it's a lot of fun. The games are really great. They also have a built-in game store where people can submit games and you can buy new ones. And because it's also so easy to develop games for, like, Panic, they know how to make a good API. Like they have all these tools where you can make games as well.
Can you vibe code them?
Probably.
I bet you. I was just thinking that. I bet you could. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of open source games that you can install. Like this one isn't really a game, but it's called XKPD, and it lets you read XKCD webcomics every single day. So whenever you launch it up, it'll download it, and that's today's XKCD. You can read the hover text and everything and browse through them.
So what's your favorite game so far on it?
There's a really great open source Tetris game for it called Playtris, but I've really enjoyed like the sort of arcade style games, like the one that I was showing there, Whitewater Wipeout, where it's like a sort of surfing game. It makes really great use of the crank. There's I really like racing games like this one, Grand Tour Legends, is a bicycle racing game. It also uses the crank really well because...
I was going to say, do you have to like turn the crank as fast as you can to move the...
You do. You use it to bike. And you can also see because it's a modern console, it supports full motion video, so long as that video is 400 by 240 black and white. But, you've got really nice modern games on it. Oh,
you bonked.
You bike too fast and you run out of stamina. It's a lot of fun.
More fun than playing games on your iPhone?
Oh yeah, because the games are much quirkier. You've got when you just have like an inherently fun looking console with a few limitations. You can't have color. You only have a few different controls. Like it inspires that creativity.
Mm-hmm. It looks really fun. Yeah, it looks really interesting. How much is it?
They recently, I think, started manufacturing a new batch of them, and you can get it for I think $230 from the
website,
which is at play.date is the URL, which is a cute little thing. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Really good show and tell there, Griffin. I
really
enjoyed that. Cool. All right. Well, that concludes our show this week. And unfortunately, we'd love to go on for hours and hours longer, but we've got to wrap it up. This is all the CultCast we have for you for this week. But the fun continues. Graham Bauer is on Blue Sky at Graham Bauer. That's GrahamBower. It's on Blue Sky. I'm L. Caney on Twitter, but I never post, so don't bother to check it out. Griffin's on Mastodon and Blue Sky at DGriffinJones. And we have a week-long discussion, all week long, at the CultCast Discord, which you can get to by going to support.thecultcast.com, support.thecultcast.com. So send us a text, use the link at the top of the show notes, and send us your questions. We'll ask them and answer them on next week's show. This has been the CultCast, the best, how long is it, 90 minutes Apple conversation you're going to hear all week long. New episodes of the CultCast come out every Thursday night, and I want to thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That was great, Griffin. That was fantastic, I think. That was really, really good. I really enjoyed that little show and tell.
Oh, thank you.
It went really well.
I think that's like the ideal level we could do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The downward camera and everything like that works really well. Yeah, cool. Excellent. And Graham, I thought your spot was super interesting too.
I can't compete with the Playdate.
I don't know. The vibe coding stuff is fascinating. I mean, you can talk to a machine like a human.
I do find it hard to believe that it exists. This is one of the things that it's like, I don't recall a technology before I couldn't quite believe it was real. But there have been a few times with Claude where I haven't given it a good instruction and it's inferred what I meant anyway. And I'm like, oh, how is that? How did it do that?